welcome to the channel. I'm Summer. Today's video is going to be your perfect beginner's guide to get better at cutting hair. Whether you are a stylist in salon, a DIY home stylist, or just starting cosmetology school, I am going to help guide you through the most important things that you need to know to ensure your client or yourself is getting the best cut possible. We are breaking it down from types of shears to the importance of proper sectioning and more. With that being said, let's get started. So the first question that we have is, what are shears? There are two types of shears that you have. You have standard shears and thinning shears, which thinning shears are commonly known as texturizing shears. Standard shears, you have two solid blades that when fully closed, they close completely on the hair. They come in different lengths and the sizes range from 5 to 7 inches. Thinning shears, you have one solid blade and then you have one blade that is made up of teeth. There's a small gap left between the top and bottom of the blade when closed. These are used to texture the hair by either removing weight to thin the hair out or to create more movement in the hair. When it comes to cutting hair, it is made up of different techniques that you can use to achieve the desired look within your haircut. And the three different cutting techniques that you need to know are blunt cutting, point cutting, and texturizing. Okay, so before we cut the hair, we first need to understand the different sections of the head. Understanding these sections is going to allow you to become more confident with cutting, and it will help you understand the role that each of the sections play within your haircut. So you have 5 total sections of the head, and they are the nape, the back of the head, the top of the head, you have your sides, and then you have your fringe bang area, also known as face frame. The bang area goes from the top of the head, which is your apex, to your recession, and it forms a triangle shape. The start of this area can be found by placing your comb on the top of your head, and where the comb leaves the head is where you will start this section and follow down to the recession on each side. The top section is where the comb leaves the side of the head, which this is known as the parietal ridge, and it starts at your recession and it goes through the parietal ridge to lower your crown, to the lower end of your crown, and then back around to the other side of the head. The top section has the most density as it has more areas of the hair to cover than the rest of our sections. The side sections are taken from the recession to just behind the ear, and this area usually has the least thickness and it tends to be the most fragile, and the sides can actually make or break a haircut. Then we have the back of the head, which goes from just behind the sides through to the other side of the head, and it's going to be below the crown and above the curve of the head. This usually lines up with just below the tip of the ear, and this area is known as the occipital bone. And our last section is the nape, which is at the curve of the head below the back section. This section is going to set the guide for the length of your haircut, and like the sides, the nape can be less thick than the other sections of the head. So the importance of the sections of the head is that it helps you determine what type of layers work best for each section. I'm going to do a dedicated video specifically about layers to be able to go into further detail for you guys, because before you layer the hair, you really need to have a full understanding on the steps that we're covering in this video, and learning to cut the hair is a process, and when you understand the basics, it will be much easier to understand the rest of what goes into cutting hair. Second point when cutting hair is maintaining an even level of moisture. And when cutting, you want all the hair laying the same. If some parts of the hair are dry and other parts are more damp, you run a greater risk of your cut coming out uneven. So when cutting the hair, you always want to keep a spray bottle nearby to dampen any hair that has gotten too dry. Our third and final point before we start our cutting techniques is to use proper sectioning when cutting. When you are cutting, whether it be for length or layers, you need to always be able to see through to your guide below. This is going to help ensure that you get the haircut evenly and take away any chance of a section or layer being shorter than what you or the client may desire. So I'm going to be doing 2 cuts today, one that we cut blunt and one that we point cut. So that way you guys can see the visual difference, and I'll be explaining the benefits of each while demonstrating. And then once the hair is dry, I will demonstrate how to use the texturizing shears, so that way you guys know how to use these as well. Blunt cutting is going to create a nice, strong, thick line. It is meant to look very precise and clean. Blunt cutting is done by cutting the hair in a straight, blunt line. There is no softness to it. A blunt cut is always going to look fuller through the ends of the hair. And when blunt cutting, sections should be thin enough to see through to your guide, that you can create tension by holding the hair in place, and thin enough that the shears can easily cut through the hair. This allows you to keep full control while cutting each section of hair. To maintain control of your cutting line, you don't want to cut past the second knuckle of your finger. Cutting past this point, you lose control of your tension, which can result in the perimeter line becoming uneven. As you move up the head into the hair above, you want to be always able to see through to your guide below and continue cutting. You will cut the nape and back of the head sections first before you move into the sides. So with blunt cutting, we are keeping a nice clean line. Point cutting, instead of cutting straight across, you are cutting into the hair, creating what we call peaks and valleys. You're coming up and out to it. It does not create a solid line. It creates softness and movement in the hair. And so usually with point cutting, you can work in larger sections, and what you're gonna do is come in, out, and it creates this nice little sort of jagged line. It's not a straight hard line. It creates a lot of softness, and you're gonna just repeat those same steps. So you'd grab a little bit of your guide, hold your fingers up higher, in, out, in, out. And then what you're gonna do when you move into your next section, you're gonna take a little bit of your old guide and take a section of your new hair, because you don't wanna re-point cut the underneath. You don't wanna add more texture to it. So you're gonna match this up at first. I'm gonna pull my guide over a little bit more. I see my length here. You still wanna grab with some nice even tension, and I'm just gonna point cut my new section. So now that I've done that, I'm gonna grab the rest of this hair. This is gonna get pushed forward so I don't cut it, and you're just gonna continue following through, creating all your perimeter before we move into the sides. To connect the sides, you will let out your first section, clipping the rest of the hair out of the way. You're gonna comb the hair straight down, creating tension with your fingers, using your guide from the back, and cut your side length to match. You're going to repeat this till the length on both sides is cut. All right, so now that we have the perimeter length is cut, while I'm not gonna go into quite as much detail about layering today, we are going to be layering this top section by blunt cutting so you guys can see what it looks like, but we're not gonna be layering any of our sides. Because the sides have less hair in general, when you take even the smallest amount of hair to create a layer, you are taking away from the thickness that we naturally have, which is gonna lead to making it look even more thin. So even if I come in here and I take this top side section, you can see how much more thin the hair gets versus when I let it down, it instantly thickens it back up. And when the hair is fully dry, you see it a little bit more. To create our layers, we are going to be working in vertical sections, starting at the front of the head and working our way all around to the other side of the head. So you're gonna come in and take your first section here along the side. And again, you want it to be thin enough that you can easily cut through with your scissors. And all we're going to be doing is we're gonna lift this hair all the way up. And what you want is for where you originally took that side section, you want it to fall all the way out, which is typically going to be in line with where that parietal ridge was, so you're not jeopardizing any of your weight line here. And we're just gonna comb the hair straight up. I've got it nice and clean, and we are just going to blunt cut straight across. So same idea, you don't wanna cut past that knuckle, and it's just a nice clean line. You're gonna let that out, and then to take your next section, you're gonna grab a little bit of your previous guide and a new section of hair, and repeat the same steps. So we're going straight up. You wanna make sure those side sections fall, so you're not jeopardizing your weight line. I can see my previous guide, cut. And then all we're gonna do is just repeat this same process all the way around the head, working in these vertical sections. So blunt cutting overall is easier of the two between blunt and point cutting. The most important thing you need to keep in mind when creating your blunt layers is that your sections are nice and clean and that they are not too big. If you take too big of sections with blunt cutting, it can lead to a choppy look if you don't get a perfectly even line with each layer. So just be sure that you are taking proper sections with your blunt layers. For our point cutting layers, we are going to be working the same way we did with our blunt layers in vertical sections, lifting everything straight up. And we're going to still be point cutting them, but we're still going to be remembering to let this hair on the bottom area fall out that's in line with our parietal ridge. Let that fall. And to point cut into your top, you're gonna do just the same thing. So in, out, in, out. You want it very soft. You do not want a hard line. So another thing you can do to make it easier, if you find it's hard to point cut with the hair up, you can come straight up. You're gonna find your previous guide here, so I can see my section. And once you find that, you can bring the hair back down and cut this way. And sometimes that's a lot easier than over directing and having to lift your elbow or your shoulder. While you're creating your point cutting layers, you still wanna make sure you're taking clean sections like you did with your blunt layers. It's best to go slow and steady. You don't wanna rush through point cutting as you stand a greater chance of nicking your fingers. All right, and then after you have created all your top layers within that top section, all you're gonna do is come along to the front and you're gonna grab the hair on the very top section, so the top of your top section, and all you're going to do is you're gonna bring it straight up to check to make sure you're even on both sides with your layers. And if there's anything left out, you're just gonna even that out. So we have a little bit just right here. And then what you're gonna do is let down that other side and then go back through these pieces to even them out. If there's any hair you need to cut, and you would just pull up the same way as you've been doing. Make sure that perimeter is out. And I've got this hair right here. Okay, so at this point, before we let out our fringe section, I am gonna respray everywhere because again, we want nice, even levels of moisture through the hair to cut this last section. So we're gonna let that out. And then respritz this. And all you're gonna do is part this down the middle. And all you're gonna wanna do is blend this in from that layer you created into your perimeter. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna grab a piece of hair from your back section here where you had a layer, and you're gonna grab the hair in the very front of your face frame, bang area. We're gonna bring this straight down, and our fingers are going to be at an angle. So we cut our perimeter horizontal, our layers vertical, and now we're cutting this face frame at an angle to keep it nice and soft. And you're just gonna go from your guide right here from your layer and just cut right into that. And then all you're gonna do now is connect the hair from your perimeter length here up into that face frame. And you're just gonna move in sections at a time, and you're gonna keep your hands at an angle, and you're gonna go from bottom to the top to meet that guide. And then what you're gonna do to connect your front piece on the other side, you're just gonna grab this corner and you're gonna match your length here, and then you're just gonna blend in, angling down. And then we will move into our point cutting face frame. The most common thing between point cutting or blunt cutting for your layers is you're gonna do your face frame bang area very similar. You're gonna come back and split this in the middle, and you would just go ahead and blend into it the same as we did before. And because this is a point cut, or supposed to be softer, we are gonna take just a little bit bigger of a section at a time. And you could also, I'll show you a different way, you could start from the bottom and work your way up. So you'd come down here to your longest point, and again, we're going to be at an angle here, and you would just point cut into that to soften it up. So same movements, but instead of that hard line, you are just cutting into it a little bit more. Maybe not quite as much as you did for your layers, but just to keep it soft. And then what you'll wanna do is take your front corner here from your one side and the corner from your other side, and you're just gonna match them up and blend. All right, so now that we have both blunt and point cut our cuts, I'm going to dry and style the mannequin so you can see them dry, and I can walk you guys through the visual difference between blunt cutting and point cutting, and then I will show you how to use your texturizing shears. So as you can see, I left the blunt cut mannequin a little bit longer just so there's visual difference between the lengths so you can really tell the two apart. They both came out really nice. They just have soft differences. The one that we cut all blunt does look a little bit more full throughout everywhere. You have that nice clean line through the bottom. When you go to run your hand through it, you see that bluntness that we cut with our blunt line, keeping ultimate thickness through the ends. You still have nice shape with your layers through the sides, maybe a little bit more full looking, maybe a touch less movement, but we have lots of face frame still. And then our point cutting layers, it obviously just gives a little bit softer of a look through those ends. You don't have that clean, hard, thick, full line. So this is all just personal preference. I do feel with the point cutting layers, you get a little bit more movement throughout the hair that creates a little bit softer of a look, but it really just comes down to personal preference between the two. Okay, so now that you got to see them side by side, we are gonna move into our final step of using our texturizing shears, and I'm gonna use the mannequin that we did blunt just because she has less movement in the hair and a little bit more density. To show you easily, if you were to remove weight from the hair, we'll come in here in this bottom section. So if you were wanting to remove weight, you would simply just grab your section of hair and you're gonna come in, the solid blade's going to be underneath and your teeth are gonna be on the top, and you're gonna place it in, and as you close, you're just gonna glide through the hair, and you can see the amount of hair that removes. And you would do that as little or as much as needed. If you want to remove a lot of weight, I would work it in that back section of the head because again, there's more density here. You don't want to overdo it in the nape nor in the sides. So if you were looking to texturize with your thinning shears, so let's say you wanted to soften a blunt line like this. Let's say you didn't want it quite as soft as the point cut, but you want a little softness here. You would really just do similar motions, and you're gonna go at it almost like you would with that point cutting. So you're still coming in the same as we did up here. That solid blade is on the bottom, and you would just lightly soften those ends. The more you do it, the more hair it's going to remove. But you can do it just enough to clean it up. Again, it's all personal preference. And what I also like to do when texturizing, the layers. So one thing I will say, while I like the way the blunt layers came out, if you do not take clean and even sectioning, you can end up making these blunt style layers look very, very choppy because they are going to be a hard line. So when you hold this hair up, you can see how straight that is. So if you do not cut this even and you cut your sections too thick, you're gonna end up possibly getting blunt lines. So if that were the case, you could use your texturizing shears for that again as well, where you would just come out and you glide them through the hair just on the ends or in the areas that you need to soften up. But just remember, when texturizing, again, whether you are thinning the hair out or just trying to add movement, the solid blade is always on the bottom, teeth are always on top, and as you close, you just glide that through the hair wherever you feel is needed to blend in any hard lines or to soften any bluntness. All right, guys, there we have it for our beginner's guide to get better at cutting hair. Whether you are cutting hair in salon or on your own at home, practice always makes perfect. I will leave linked below in the description some affordable mannequins you can work on to get more acclimated to the steps we've gone over in this video. Don't forget, I will be filming a beginner's guide to get better at layering tutorial that I will post right here once it's ready. I hope I was able to help you better understand the beginning steps of hair cutting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.